Good morning and welcome to Carson Memories. We are a show about reflecting on the past of those people that helped make Carson City what it is today. Today, we are interviewing Mike Shaughnessy, who grew up here as a little boy and came to Carson City when he was 2 years old. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
So tell us about the experiences that you remember from way back when, from your youngest memory.
Well, youngest memory, I think growing up, I guess you can say growing up, I never did grow up, but I think raising down here, I love the town because it's so small. You know, we were like about 2,900 when Dad moved us here, and went through school here, all the way through the grammar school on King Street, over to the high school on Thompson Street, right across the street from here. Started there in 1940 and ended up graduating in 1953. Spent all of the years in school here in Carson. And I remember the town was so small that you could, you know, it was like they talk about a small town. Everybody knew everybody and what everybody else was doing. Mm-hmm. And so it was really nice. You knew everybody, and it was a safe town. It was like, when did you go home? It was when the streetlights came on, if they didn't call you sooner. Of course, with no phones or anything like that, we just was on our own. And it was fairly safe. I remember that pretty much. And the friendliness of the town. Mm-hmm.
And that would have been a time where there was only one paved street.
Right.
And the rest of them were dirt.
Right.
And you also were a paper boy here.
Yes, I delivered papers for the Appeal. It was down on 2nd Street where the mall is now. And several of us got hired on as paper boys. And we would take the paper right off the press, fold them, box them, and put them in our bag, get on our bicycle, and take off and deliver. I had mostly the east side of town and the north part of town. I still remember some of the places I delivered papers to way back. Excuse me, but we did really well. And we were getting $5 a week, and we were in tall clover. We were doing really well.
I bet you were. Yeah. And at that time, there was only one police officer.
I remember, yeah, the one police officer. They had the one car. They would travel around town. And as I recall, they didn't have any radios. Because the way they got notified was, my mother was a telephone operator, night telephone operator at the Bell Telephone. And if they had a call come in looking for an officer, she had a switch at the telephone office which turned a light on. There was a cord or a wire that went from the telephone office to the building across the street. And that light would come on, and as the policeman would drive around, they'd look to see if that light was on. If it came on, they would come into the pay telephone in front of the telephone office and ask the operator what was going on, what they needed to do.
What was that telephone operator's name? Do you remember?
Yeah, the night operator was Stella Shaughnessy, my mother.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, she pretty much the night operator. There were a lot of other operators, whether Bell Cross and Fay Laird, and I think there was a couple others I can't remember now, and I'm sorry I can't remember them. But they all were telephone operators. But Mom pretty much had the night shift, and she really liked that one.
And she was the one that was known pretty much throughout the community. If anything might happen, you'd call her, and all the phone calls went through her. Everything did back then.
Well, everything went. They would pick up the phone and ask for a number, and she would plug it in, and she would know pretty much who was calling who. And there was times when she would get a call, and they'd ask her, pick up the phone, they'd say, "Stella, do you know where so-and-so is?" She'd say, "Yeah, he's probably at the old corner bar or something," and they'd call it.
And there was one light
right.
in town, and the volunteer fire trucks, or the people that were volunteers, would jump on trucks as it would go around the corner, you were saying.
The fire whistle would blow, or the horn would blow, and at the old fire station behind Myers Hardware, they would start out, the full-timers. There were volunteers in various state offices and so on around. They would run up to the street corner there on Musser and Carson. There was a gas station there by the Senator Club. And they would come up and stop and jump out of their car, leave the keys in it. They would run out and they would catch the fire engine, sometimes when it's going around the corner heading for a fire. And they would jump on and go to the fire. And then in the meantime, the guy running the gas station would go get the cars and pull them off the street and put them in the parking lot of the gas station or the Senator Club, which was right there. And that street light, we talked about that before, in Musser and Carson, that street light was the only street light in Carson. But it was also the only street light from South Carson to Bishop, California.
Oh my.
Because there was no other stoplights in Minden or Gardnerville or any Levining or anything until you got down to Bishop. So basically, when you left South Reno, and I'm not sure where the last one was there, you leave South Reno, you come through Carson, the only stoplight you'd run into was at Carson and Musser. And then from then on, you wouldn't hit a stoplight until you hit Bishop, California.
Well, things have certainly changed since
They
then,
certainly
haven't
have
they?
changed.
The Pine Cone was a Chinese restaurant that we had downtown.
But it was not a Chinese restaurant at the Pine Cone. Jack Shoemaker ran that. It was a regular coffee shop. It turned into a Chinese restaurant a little bit later on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was the Pine Cone, with Jack Shoemaker ran the Pine Cone, and it was right next to there was the Cash Mercantile store there, and there was a dress shop that my mother ran part-time, and then there was another building on the corner that I don't remember what it was, but there on the top of that building, it was just south of the old post office. Mm-hmm. It's a two-story building. In the top of that was a little dormitory, and there were some young airline or Air Force cadets, Army Air Corps cadets, came and lived in that dormitory, and they practiced and learned their flying at the Carson Airport. This was during the wartime.
Yeah.
And I remember that specifically because they had bunks up there, but the thing I remember specifically is my sister married one of those cadets that was living there, and went on from there.
Wow, that's something to be rather proud of, that we had that going on in our little town then.
A lot of people remember that, I'm sure. These young fellows were learning to fly at the Carson Airport.
Yeah. You also remember where the legislature is now. In that area was a gas station.
In the corner of 5th Street in Carson, on the would be the northeast corner, was a gas station. At one time, Tommy Young ran that gas station. When I was in high school, I pumped gas there with him. Across the street was a house, and I believe it was the Williams house. Mary Williams was a fairly popular nurse around town. And then across the street from that, I'm drawing kind of a blank.
It's all right.
But I think across the street was Jack's Bar, is where they're now. Where the
okay.
Ormsby House was another bar. It was called the 49er Bar. And that was, and then below that there was some housing on the street.
And also, we were talking about that was where the ladies of the night were.
Well, I was told that. was basically a little before my time. There were some areas down in that back off of Curry, somewhere down in there. Supposedly there was some places that
The red light district.
basically.
I have heard that also. I'm going to have Mike take us on a journey. As we go from the north end of town and coming south, there was an old hotel back then that had great big writing on it. And in that area, we also had an outdoor drive-in theater. And I remember these, but he certainly can tell us about these places and where they were, and we'll just keep walking through this journey as we come down to the south end of Carson. So Mike, take us on that.
If you go to the drive-in, that was north of the highway, or north of Hot Springs Road. And you come down from there, and on the Hot Springs Road intersection, there was a motel, and I believe it was called the Village Inn, but I can't be positive of that. And then as we come down the road, the Deluxe Motel was on Carson Street, but it was just offset a little bit with a parking lot, but it was a two-story motel, hotel type. Then there was, on the other side of the street, there was the Ranch Hotel, which was a hotel motel type thing, but it was one story. And then you had the Frontier Motel, and then John Savage had a construction company in there, and I believe it was where the old Safeway is, and there's a automotive place there or something. And as you come down the street, there was several houses. I'm trying to pick up in my mind where they were. Coming down the street farther, down the hill, there was the Market Spot Grocery on the corner, and there was a little shopping mall type thing in there. Then across the street where there's a bank, so in there now, if you recall the railroad car that is running now, the mail car that they have
At the museum?
at the museum, the one that's running now.
Yeah.
we remember that coming through the valley and actually chasing it to cross at the S-curve many years ago. It turned into a diner. And on that street there, this corner of Highway 50 and Main Street, on that east side, it was built there as a diner. And it was Denny's Diner, and it was Mr. Dennison was that ran that for a while.
Now, is this over in the area where Heidi's is now? With Dutch Mill?
That was the Dutch Mill. This is kitty corner from that.
Okay.
Catty corner, however you say it.
Kitty corner.
And that was where Denny's Drive-In was. Denny's Diner was, rather, not a drive-in. That particular railroad car moved down to the south by the plumbing company, Bernhard Plumbing Company.
It was a plumbing company
and
for
then,
a while.
And went down there. It was a restaurant down there for a while before they bought it next door and turned it into a plumbing store.
I do remember it being a restaurant too.
And then it came from there back to the museum, refurbished, and now it's running again. So we saw all of that. So there was a diner there on that street that was catty corner from the Dutch Mill. And the Dutch Mill was probably the most popular place in town for everybody, especially if you were going to get a hamburger and a milkshake with your girlfriend and it cost 35 cents. But that was kind of the hangout for almost everybody. And the one police car we talked about before, they spent some time in there. There was a couple of slot machines.
Yes.
And they would play slot machines, and once in a while they'd go out to look, see if the light was on. But there was times when my mother said they're looking for them, she would call the Dutch Mill to see if they were there, to call the cops.
It's nice to see that there is still one historic building that's a restaurant.
Yes. And there was some vacant lot across the street, but down about where the Hardman House is now, there was Berger's Bowling Alley. And I'm sure a lot of them remember the bowling alley. It was in the 59s and 60s someday. But we remember prior to that, there was a lumber company in there. It was called Oliver Lumber Company. And it was a regular lumber company. And I had told you the story that we remembered. We kids could go in for a nickel. We could buy a little block of salt like this that they put in rabbit cages. And we found out that we could buy those for a nickel. And we would walk around licking in that salt thing all the time. Like the salt was really good for us in those days.
Is that where the term salt lick came from?
I think so. Because we were right on top of that. And so all the kids in that whole neighborhood, we hung around together and we would do those things. And then on the other side, there was a space in there, I can't remember, that on the corner was Dick's Bar next to the Civic Auditorium. And that was, when there was events going on at the Civic Auditorium, that was easy, get across the street to have a little nip on the
Salt.
Then you had the vacant lot past the auditorium, and then it was the railroad station. We remember that. Across the railroad station was, on that corner was a market. I think it was the Meckas's, I think was the name of it. And you could buy penny candy in there. It was just down the street from us. And just north of that, across the street, was a Safeway building. And then if you go from Meckas's Market down, I'm trying to remember, along there was George Miller had a garage in that same block. At one time, I think there was a sportsman-type store in there. I think the Hamlins ran that. Enrico's, I think, was there before it moved north. I think there was one in there, a bar. And then on the end was the Toscano bar. And that was next to the museum's open lot. So, and then across the street from that, where that gas station is, was a vacant lot. And during Nevada Day celebrations, that's where the Indians would come to town and have their stick games. And they would take over that whole lot to have their dancing and their stick games.
Oh.
And we would really enjoy watching some of that as part of the celebration. They were not supposed to be having alcohol in those days. But I don't know, they may have gotten it somehow, I don't know. If you go next to that, then where the coin shop is now was our theater. That was, what was his name? Well, Art Bowen, I think his name was, that ran the theater. And of course, that was across from the museum also. The other side, south of the museum, was the Arlington Hotel.
Yes.
And that had a restaurant in there. And then there was a shoe store, Burlington Shoe Store, Art Burlington. There was a Western Auto Store in there, I think, at one time. And it moved on south. Across the street from that, there was the Old Corner Bar. There was the stairway to go to the Eagles Hall. there was, believe it or not, there was a Hudson garage in there, and it was an old Hudson car. And I remembered that one because the guy that owned its daughter married my brother. So, well, right. And then there was Broderick's had a bar, Ella Broderick, and on the end of that was, next to the corner next to the post office, was called Marjorie Main, was a restaurant. And I remember that one. Then if you go back across the street, you had the Capitol Bar, and next to the Capitol Bar, I recall, was the Duck Inn, was a little hamburger stand, maybe 6 stools. Best hamburgers in the world, probably just that much above the Dutch Mill. And great hamburgers, but only 6 stools.
Wow.
Next to it was Burger's Pool Hall. Now it was a newsstand later on, but they originally had pool tables in the back, and we'd go back there and play pool. Then there was a knick-knack type shop, like the treasure shop type thing, that the ladies went into, and I would never go into because the lady that owned the place always burned incense. And I couldn't stand the smell of that incense. So I'd wait outside while my mother went in there. And then next to that was Isle Bear had a jewelry store, Bear's Jewelry Store. And in fact, Isle and my dad were in the Lions Club together many, many, many years ago. Then there was the bars, and the Globe and the Ship Bar were in there somewhere, and trying to picture it again. And then you had, on the corner was the First National Bank. Mm-hmm. Then south of that was the telephone company, which you said is a lawyer's office today. And then next to it was the Kelly and Lindsay's Bakery. There was Angelo's Barber Shop and the Granada Shoe Store. And then there's Tommy's Victory Club on the other end. The spaces in there, I'm not sure, there might be something where they were located, or there might be a space in it I'm missing. Across the street from that was that building I told you about, the cadets. And then there was a dress shop, and Western Union, I believe, was in there. And then at one time, Wilbur Stodik had a store in there.
Now, is that next to Murdoch's?
Murdoch's was on the other side of the street.
Was on the other side of the street.
Murdoch's was where the Kelly and Lindsay's Bakery was.
Okay.
Because that, you know, Murdoch's was a newcomer.
Right.
So that was different.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to get back those times I can remember. And then across the street, or then was the Industrial Commission on the corner, the Senator Cafe, and then the gas station that parked all the volunteers' cars. Then you go across the street from that, you had the, did I get to, yeah, I got to Myers Hardware, we're okay.
Yeah.
And of course the courthouse. And
now Myers Hardware at that time, who owned that?
George Myers.
George Myers.
George
Okay.
Myers. And Laddie Furlong, who a lot of people remember, ran it forever.
Right.
In fact, if you needed something, and it didn't matter what it was,
right,
you could go into Myers Hardware and talk to Laddie, and he'd say, I think we have one of those. And he would take you in the back, down these wooden stairs, and there was shelves upon shelves upon shelves. A lot of dust on some of it. And he'd wander around down there. Pretty soon he would come up with what you're looking for.
Oh, he did. He was just amazing. If
Yeah.
there was ever any question of something you didn't know how to do or what you needed, he was right there with it. Yeah.
You could do that. And then, of course, below that, of course, with the Capitol building and the courthouse and the Heroes Memorial building, Vic Perini or someone like that had a bar.
Pardini?
Perini, I believe.
Perini.
And Pardini's was the Victory Club.
Oh, okay. I was wondering
This
where
is
that
Perini. And with the gas station, and then some of the other below that was kind of a mix in my mind. I know that where Stewart Street comes in is the mall down there. That was the highway maintenance yard at the time. And at the bottom end of that was an open area that they would put the carnival in when it would come to town. I remember we'd have to ride our bike from the north end of Carson to go down to the carnival, then ride back again.
Oh, well, tell us about the park, because for the most part, we know the park is Mills Park, but it was called?
It was called Foley's Forest. And actually the railroad ran through there that came out of the roundhouse and would go through there and then turn south towards Gardnerville. And in Foley's Forest was mainly all those trees that you see down there now, but a lot of sagebrush. And there was paths and driving spots in through there. Really neat for the high school kids to park.
And there was some old train cars down there, wasn't there, at that time, or?
Not in the park that I recall.
Okay.
I know just this side where the library is, there was some cars parked there. One of them was Charles Clegg and Lucius Beebe. the famous authors from Virginia City. They had their car there. In fact, that car is at the Sacramento Museum now. We would see that park there. But the foliage forest, my dad and I and my brother went down there to try and clean some of the trees out one time with some equipment. We had some heavy equipment, a Caterpillar and stuff. Tried to clean that out because they thought they could have some kind of a park in there. Well, we didn't get very far with it. Didn't have any help. We did what we could, and then we left. Didn't go. Later on, when it was turned over to the city, in that part I'm not sure of. I think the Mills family, I think it was. Don't quote me on that. Turned it over and had to be for entertainment or the community. And then they went on to make Mills Park, which I think has turned out to be really, really a nice venue.
I remember it as a golf course.
Right.
And my brother was a golfer in there all the time, and it was just a wonderful little park back then. And I lived across the street from that. And yeah, that was, it's changed over the years, but we still have it, which is good.
Hey, remember when we moved to our house down on off of Robinson Street, our kids picked up a few dollars by getting golf balls. Well, they would slice over and would come over into our yard because we were one set of houses over.
Right.
And they would collect the golf balls and take them to the center over there.
Now, you went to school, you went to high school here, which was in the old Borderwick Bray building now.
Right.
And that's really interesting to me because there was also another stone building over here that you went to school, and that's no longer here.
No longer here, no. Most people remember it. I had someplace, I had an old picture of it. Those people that have been around for a while remember it was on the corner of, it was Division, King, Minnesota, and Musser that took the whole block.
Yeah.
And it was all grades from kindergarten through 8.
Right.
And we all went to the same school. And they say and you talked about playgrounds. Our playground on the west side of that was all dirt. And we played marbles and whatever, baseball, whatever we could in the dirt out there. And when we'd graduate from there, we would go over to this school here. And of course, St. Teresa's was right here in the middle of it. And the parking lot out here was a basketball court, paved basketball court, and we could come over there and play basketball. We also could get into some heck of snowball fights with the high school kids because we would try to ambush them on the way to school.
So Chinatown, tell me about Chinatown.
The most I can remember of it is being across the street from the old armory down there. I worked in that building for a while, but on that side of the street, there was a couple of old buildings, a 2-story building that was there for a long time. And early on, they had some buildings down there. I don't recall a lot of it. The thing I remember most was when there was a fire at Hunter's Lodge. And if you remember, Hunter's Lodge was covered with bark as the outside of the building. When it caught fire, the wind was blowing, and as I recall, and there may be some others out there would correct me, but as I recall, the wind took it down. A lot of that caught some of the old shacks in Chinatown, and they burned up pretty much. That one 2-story building was there for quite a while. I think the Employment Security building is there now, but that lot out there was Chinatown.
That's where it was. And the vets housing, where was that?
Well, the sheriff's office is now. When the veterans came back, they put up some, as you recall, they put up some Quonset huts down there for people to live in.
Right.
And then they took those down and built some, it's kind of like a long motel type setup with apartments on both sides. And that was for the vets coming home from the war, a place for them to get started.
Now, your father was in the war.
Yes.
And did he ever talk about it?
Not a lot. He was in the First World War, and I mentioned to before, he was raised in Wyoming with 6 sisters and a mother, and he decided World War I sounded a lot safer than being with his 6 sisters. And so he went over, and he was in 5 major battles in Europe, and came back and started a family. But he didn't talk about it much. He was in the artillery, so he was not down into, he did cross the Rhine with his units, but...
and how long did your father live? How old was he?
He was 56.
Oh my gosh, a young man.
Yeah, he was 56. My mother was 72, my brother was 48, and my sister was 57, and they're all gone.
Wow. So you have any more family here in Carson City?
Well, just my own family,
Yes.
but as far as the rest of the family. There is 2 cousins in Wyoming who I've only met once. And other than that, except for my own family, my kids, my grandkids and great-grandkids, that's pretty much it.
I would like to point out that the picture behind us is Mike as a little boy and his father in the Nevada Day Parade. That's really quite a picture. That's something you need to be proud of to have. That's pretty amazing.
Well, that was, like I said, my dad dressed me up that day, decided he wanted to be in the parade, so he dressed me up as Daniel Boone, and he dressed himself up as a Daniel Boone, and we were in the parade. And then I was many parades later. Mark Twain and Robert E. Lee and a miner and a prospector, and I remember one of the things he made me as prospector, and I had a real live burro with the pack on it, and they put me behind a float from a Harold's Club in Reno, and this float had these tall showgirls with these shimmering dresses on, gold, silver, copper, and whatever, and from them came a big rainbow that came out the back of the float, and I was underneath that rainbow as the prospector.
Oh.
And the idea was, this is my end of the rainbow.
Yes.
And of course I was too young to appreciate the girls on the float at that time, but.
Well, that's great,
Yeah.
though. What a great vision that is for you to have. When you think of Carson City, is there a fond memory that really comes to your mind that you...
I think, I centered again around Nevada Day because way back it was really a big thing. Everyone dressed in Western outfits. The ladies wore the long dresses and everything. And going to work in the state offices or wherever they were, everybody dressed. Men grew whiskers. We had beard contests way back then. Men grew whiskers. And downtown in front of the post office, they had a hoosecow build up. And if you didn't have Western gear on, you got locked up until you bought a Nevada Day button or paid some sort of a fine. And then that was part of the celebration. And when they set it up, they had decorations the full street, almost 3 or 4 each block across the main street, and you could drive down and see all these decorations on the street corners, on the streets. Everything was beautiful. And get excited about Nevada Day. And there was the parade and the football game, which most of us that grew up here, we probably played in that football game on Nevada Day at one time or another.
Yes, I do remember that being the post office. We had some real wonderful history, and that's one of the buildings that is still standing, and it's a beautiful building.
Yeah, I had a post office box in that building when they finally shut down and went over there on Robinson, off of Robinson. I had the same number, and now they've taken it up to the new post office. I still have the same box number that I had, excuse me, from the original post office.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, that's a wonderful story. So, from the old telephone building where your mother worked, your mother seemed like quite a woman. She was involved in a lot of things. And your family being here, and we surely are appreciative that you're able to come and share your stories with us. And you are also a member of the Lions Club.
Right, I'm a member. I've been a member of the Lions Club for 34 years.
And that's where I met you. I was asked to be a guest speaker there, and I sat next to you, and I just loved your spirit. And your wife is named Donna.
Donna.
And did you meet her here?
Met her in Reno. Actually, a friend of mine that we were going to be escorts at the 1864 ball at the Armory, and I asked him if he'd be an escort with me. We had just graduated from OCS, and we're going to wear our uniforms. And he said, well, can I bring my girlfriend? And I said, well, I don't have a date. And he says, well, she has a girlfriend. I said, well, okay, we'll see what happens. So we went over and met her at her friend's house. We went to the dance. A couple of weeks later, I asked for a date, and that was in October, and we got married on the 22nd of January. And we just passed our 50th anniversary.
Well, congratulations. Well, I want to thank you for joining Carson Memories. And I really want to thank Mike for being our guest today. And we hope you tune in next time.